I met Hann Furmann in March 2015, about a year and a half after my husband died. Hann told me he was a widower with a young daughter attending college. He also told me he had lost his oldest daughter and wife in different auto accidents. He spoke with a strong German accent and said one of his parents was from Norway and the other from Germany. He put me in touch with his daughter. One of my friends Googled him and told me he was a scammer and that she was sorry. I wish I had listened to her. I fell hard for this guy. He told me he was going for a contract in the UK, which he, of course, was awarded. The contract was in Ghana. Once he got to Ghana, he and his assistant needed MacBooks, and they had to be there ASAP so he could do his business and so he could communicate with the assistant the company had given him. He told me his credit card was blocked for possible fraud, so he had no access to his funds. I told him, "You are a scammer," and somehow he was able to explain it away. When I told a friend about him and what he'd done, she answered his phone and cussed him out and told him to never talk to me again. Once again, I wish I'd taken her advice and not talked to him again. The next thing I know, he's calling me from the hospital, telling me he had collapsed at work because of what my friend said. Of course, he couldn't pay the bill, so I had to send $600. He told the company, he never named it, paid him in gold, so he needed a certificate to get it out of the country. I also needed to bribe the officials with an iPhone to help move and release it along. Before I knew it, I was paying for his first class hotel bill. Then he was in a car wreck in a very expensive car on his way to the airport, and he needed me to pay to get it fixed and to get the other car fixed. I paid for 6 first class tickets on KLM to get him home. But his passport was being held. Gold needed to be stored, or he was going to be arrested. I was so crazy about this person that I had never met, that all he had to do was wiggle his finger and I sent money. I even drove all over to different Western Unions and MoneyGrams to send him money. After I went through what I had inherited, I started getting loans, maxing out credit cards, and even selling my jewelry to get money to send to him. Before you start wondering how I didn't see the red flags, I want you all to know that it's all about psychology and mind control. A saving grace for me is that when it was my money and I wasn't a mule. Another thing, I didn't take on more than I could handle, but I sure did push it. I never allowed myself to get to the point that I was homeless. This is not a complete, but a good picture. We didn't talk on the phone a lot, but he messaged on Yahoo Messenger. We talked about marriage and even planned to marry in December, but he kept having problems. I finally came clean to my family, and boy, were they mad. My daughter felt like it was her fault, but she didn't know about it. Long story short, he scammed me out of a lot of money. This next story is not a typical romance scam story that we're used to hearing. It's not a West African using stolen Westerners' photos. It's actually a guy from Egypt who is scamming many women. We felt this story was very, very important to share as we get locked into the notion that scammers are all West Africans using fake photos, when in fact romance scamming is a wide range of different types of scams. This one lady was brave enough to share her story, and we thank her greatly for it. I hope you all take a listen and realize that scamming comes in all shapes and all forms. I'm an online victim of a romance scam. Huss Salem friend requested me on September 6, 2016, through a mutual friend, I found out. He is a cafe owner in Cairo, Egypt, which was a lie, and a basic diving instructor for PADI, which I emailed, and no one by that name works there, so another lie. For a year and 7 months, I was groomed with everything I wanted to hear and asked personal questions to become the perfect boyfriend from the figment of my imagination. His stories were consistent. His money was frozen. His ex-wife cheated. He's Muslim and foreign women wanting to sleep with him, but he is a respectable man who can only sleep with who he loves. His dad passed away when he was 15, and his mom died 4 years ago. He was the caregiver. He wants to marry and have a big family. I was 39 and he was 37 at the time. I sent him a Valentine's package to his address. I wanted to visit him in Egypt to see if he was real, but gave an excuse of concern for my safety, so we never met. We Skype call each other only on a number of times. The communication was bad all the time. I saw all the red flags but ignored each one, from his Facebook profile location saying Alabama and not in Egypt. We talked daily, but noticed a lot of foreign women in his Facebook page and saw flirty comments, so he blocked me and got mad for doubting him. Long story short, I did an Amazon shopping for him because it was expensive. I told him only if he pays me back. His family ordered through him and will place an order, and he would collect the money with an extra $20 for myself. Well, I stopped it after 4 orders and $2,000 later. He never sent me money because the bank was holding his money. He was fixing his immigration to visit me because he wanted to come for me. He was close, but his ex-wife closed the process. He got denied. Then he applied in Canada and was going to be approved, and I had sold everything and was wanting to move to Canada. I received a text from his brother that he died in a car accident, and the funeral was the following day. I grieved so hard. I tried contacting his family through Facebook. No one ever responded. I was looking for flights, but wanted someone to pick me up. No response. After 2 days, I decided to contact his Facebook friends that he said was a good friend of his to tell him of his death. She said he texted her for Mother's Day, and we started comparing lies. It was all a lie. She sent him a message and he answered her. He downplayed our relationship and that I was following him and wanted marriage and sex. He would say the same thing to her as to me. He controlled everything and everyone. If one of us got suspicious and told him he would block the person so they would not find his lies and say they are liars and believe him. I spoke to his ex-wife and found out all the horrible things he did to her. She paid everything, traveled to Egypt 3 times, and was locked up in his family's apartment due to safety reasons. Took her debit card for money and paid for everything. She thinks he would not do anything physical to harm her, but he would tell her, "Return to me and I will forgive you for cheating." She found over 20 messages of different women, of money and marriage proposals around the world. He had been doing this for years. He has several fake online profiles. I believe his family are in on it too. So I did what any grieving girlfriend would do. I reported him to the FBI, FTC, state attorney, put a high fraud alert on my credit report. He has all my personal and financial information, inappropriate pictures and videos for extortion. He has my tax return, my social security, and my bank accounts. I received a message from some guy in Africa who happened to be in my friends list. Same story. I thought it was my ex posing as him. I called him out for being a scammer and he threatened me and that he was going to find me because I refused to video chat. I reported him to Facebook and blocked him. I combed through all my friends, which are set to private, and unfriended people I did not know. Getting back to my ex, he targets single Christian mothers and older women. He talks to everyone's children, friend requests to women's friends to create a faster sense of trust. He has all the characteristics of a sociopath. He isolated me from family and friends, and I am trying to readjust back into society. I learned a hard lesson, but I fell through his cracks because everyone needs to ask him before talking to a stranger like myself. He had an answer for everything. He was loyal. The women will tell him if I contacted them, and I am sure he wanted every one of me. He would call me wife, profess his undying love for me, true love, soulmate, and it goes on, the lies. It was lies after lies. I was a fool. He looks for women who were in abusive relationships. He has many women he is scamming. I have his real address, phone number. I bought him clothes, a diving watch, cell phone, tablet. Always had a family tragedy or sickness. I did Western Union and lent him thousands. He said he would pay me back in Canada. Then he died. I am sharing my story to warn others. He deleted his Facebook page after I found out he was laying low, or maybe he might be up with other Facebook fake profiles. I reversed all the images
And the cafe was a lie. The engagement ring, the family food gatherings, they were all from Google. He was always polite and sweet. That is why women are fooled by him. He would tell me, I know you more than you know yourself. He is a patient man and will wait all the time for everyone to feel comfortable. I wish I could dent his operation. I list everything and myself left me traumatized and in debt. I do not trust in no one and pulled at my every heartstring. I do not want other women sucked into his web of lies. He always wanted to know everything and ask him before, made me dependent on him completely. I am the only one who has reported him to the FBI. He is also currently on Instagram, Snapchat, Vero, and all other social media. He also uses Hangouts, WhatsApp, emails, has many emails as well. He has a lot of diving friends and claims to be a diving instructor, but he's not certified. I have all his real information because of his immigration papers. He put he was living in Miami, Alabama, but never Egypt. He told his ex-wife he was in Canada and the owner of a scuba equipment shop. It's another lie. He claims to have money and wants to open another cafe, another shop. It's another lie. He has paid zero to the women and claims he spent money on them. The brave woman that shared this story was also the victim of domestic violence in her past, and the scammer preyed on vulnerable women such as herself at that time. And as I said, this is a different type of romance scam, but it's something that people need to be aware of. We have a lot of victims that come to our inbox speaking to a man in Egypt or a man in Saudi Arabia or Morocco, and they say, he's legit. It's his real photo, it's his real profile. It doesn't make it safe. You need to look at the whole picture, what the person's telling you. If they're asking you for money and things like that, always say no. And never, never, never give up your personal information to someone you've never met in person. Again, thank you for sharing your story. I met the man who I came to know as David Nolan in December of 2016. I was recently divorced after 25 years of marriage. Here I was, out on my own as a single woman again. Kids grown, and left me alone and very lonely. Now my ex-husband had moved out of state, and most of my family was not living near me. I took to the internet for companionship. I joined POF, or Plenty of Fish as you know it, thinking it would be a safe dating site to maybe test the waters. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, but was open to maybe meeting a nice guy to possibly click with and chat to. I received my first message from the man I know as David a week before Christmas. This year was going to be different, and I was spending Christmas alone. David told me he was an engineer for a big oil company, that he too was divorced with a daughter who was 15. He was 4 years younger than I, and the photos I was sent were of a very handsome man. Wow, lucky me, right? He told me he was not always on POF and asked for my email address. I thought nothing of it and gave him my email. The next morning I got an email from David telling me all about himself. His divorce was nasty, and his ex cheated on him and ran off with a man who was also her drug dealer. Leaving his daughter, he called Maggie, all alone without a mother. He said Maggie would stay with his sister, her aunt, while he was away in Malaysia working on his oil contract, but would communicate with Maggie via email nearly every day. The first few emails were basic, getting to know each other, our likes and dislikes, our history, views, etc. I noticed early on some spelling errors and grammatical errors in the way he typed. Honestly, I didn't look too much further into it. I did one time ask him why his spelling was off. He said he was raised in Norway and his father was from Spain, so English was not always spoken at home. That, coupled with his busy work schedule, he sometimes wrote to me when he was very tired. Wow, poor guy, I thought. David finally asked me for my phone number. I felt enough time had passed and he was safe to give my number to, so I did. Boy, was that a mistake. Within minutes, my phone was ringing. It was David. He was away on business and just wanted to chat to me to tell me how much I meant to him, how close we've grown. He did have a bit of an accent, but I figured it was a mix of Norwegian, maybe some Spanish. He said he had lived abroad in his childhood and some of his adult life. We talked on the phone for an hour. The connection was very poor, but I chalked it up to him being in Malaysia. The number he called me from was a Florida number, which made sense because he was from Florida but working overseas. He asked me to download WhatsApp. I've never been great with these things, apps and technology, so I reluctantly downloaded it. He said it would be easier and free for us to talk and not run up the data on his phone as he was calling me from Malaysia. I found myself falling for this charming man. I started emailing his daughter. She would write to me about twice a week telling me about her schooling, life with her aunt. She would ask invasive questions about if I was going to be her new mother. She told me she spent her summers in Sweden at a boarding school. She asked me about her father and I's relationship. David started to text me almost every single night, often calling me in the middle of the night, waking me up to chat. I was working a full-time day job, so these late night calls were taking a toll on my mental function and physical function at work due to lack of sleep. My work performance was falling behind, but I didn't care. I was in love. The calls became more and more texts, more calls, keeping me awake. I would get home from my shift at 5 p.m. David knew this, and by 5:05 he was calling me. Sometimes I wasn't able to answer as I was driving home or cooking, etc. He would accuse me of not loving him, ignoring him. He said I should answer each time he calls, as he's going out of his way to phone me all the way from Malaysia, and he's a very busy businessman. The lack of sleep grew. I was getting a few hours a night between his texts and calls. I would tell him I needed sleep, but he would say he worked all day and he was calling me on location from his job, and he could get in trouble for calling. He made me feel like I was ungrateful, or that I wasn't committed, and that he would find another love. I stayed awake, chatting, texting, emailing him, his daughter. It all became so much. I was so involved. One night, he kept me up all night as he had a problem with work with some machine that had broke. I literally stayed up all night, went to work for 10 hours, came home to him calling me again. This time he was in a panic, wanting money. There had been an accident due to the broken oil drilling machine. A worker got hurt, and it was his fault for not properly fixing the machine. He needed $5,000 to pay the injured worker or face jail. He told me his daughter was crying over it, and then I got an email from his daughter pleading to help her daddy. I was exhausted, scared, upset. He said he would come home as soon as it was paid. We would meet and he would pay me back, and he couldn't touch his account until the contract was done. I didn't know how any of this worked. I was confused, in love, scared. He pressured me to transfer the money right away. He said he needed to get the money, and because he was not a citizen of Malaysia, he couldn't get a bank account or pick up the money. He told me I would have to go to Western Union to transfer the money to one of his assistant contract managers. He said to send it in 4 parts so no one would question the payments, otherwise his company might fire him. I told him I would do it tomorrow, after work, after I've had rest. He became angry and said I needed to do it right now, or he would go to jail and his daughter would lose her father forever. I was so tired from being awake, hungry from working all day, and I wanted to just collapse. But he pressured me, and it had to be done right now. I ended up getting my shoes back on in an exhausted state. The bank closed in an hour, and I drove there and took out my savings, nearly everything I had after my divorce. It was all I had worked for. I then had to find a Western Union. Honestly, I've never sent one before. Finally, after a good 15-minute drive across town, I found one. They were closing in 30 minutes, and I rushed in. 5,000 in cash and sent the payments off to his agent, a Nigerian man who he said was his assistant of the oil company and a very trustworthy, reliable man. The clerk didn't bat an eye as I sent all these payments. I texted him the MTCN numbers and he thanked me and told me he would see me soon. I got home, collapsed, and slept all night. In the morning, I didn't hear from David, but I did get an alert on my phone that the money had been picked up from Western Union. I ate breakfast, went to work, no texts. I called, texted, no reply. A day turned into 3 days, and 3 days turned into a week. I emailed the daughter. I emailed David. I texted. I called, which was met with a recording saying the Google subscriber is unavailable. What's going on? I tried calling the major oil company he said he worked for, and was met with a few transfers and finally to a directory which did not list him. I talked to someone at the company, and they had no one listed that worked by that name. The place in Malaysia he said he was staying, the hotel, did not have him listed as a guest and never have. I felt sick. I was scammed. Was I scammed? What was going on? Was he arrested? Yes, that has to be it. He was arrested. I called the police in Malaysia. He was in Kuala Lumpur. They had no record of him, and the officer suggested I file a report as I've possibly been scammed. My dream man was gone, and I had been scammed. I filed a report, but there was nothing else they could do. It fell on deaf ears. The Nigerian man had to have been David. The daughter was David. It was all a lie. Pretty soon I found myself getting bombarded with messages, emails. My POF profile had requests for contact from all kinds of profiles. I spent the next 6 months fighting off email and text from unknown numbers, men offering friendship, army captains, oil workers, handsome soldiers, and men who were widows wanting attention. I was a scammer's hunt. I deleted WhatsApp, changed my number, and the calls would not stop, and I closed my email. The scammers found my Facebook, and I was infested with friend requests from fake profiles. A warning to everyone out there: don't fall for the smooth talking man who wants to lead you to an app. Above all, don't send money to anyone. This is my story. It has taken me a long time to rebuild what he took. Never again. And I'd like to again thank everyone who submitted their stories. We'll be doing some more stories in the future. If you'd like to share your story, you can join us on Facebook at Scamming Scammers Action. Come to our inbox. You can remain anonymous, and we'll put your story on our next list for videos. And again, thanks to everyone who has shared their stories. Remember, you can always remain anonymous. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. This is William with Scamming Scammers. Bye.